25. Hazel. Everything smelled like poison. 2 days after leaving Venice, Hazel still couldn't get the nauseous scent of the cow monster out of her nose. The sickness didn't help. The Argo too sailed down the Adriatic, a beautiful glittering expanse of blue. But Hazel couldn't appreciate it, thanks to constantly rolling on the ship. Above deck, she tried to keep her eyes fixed on the horizon. The white cliffs that always seemed just a mile or so to the east. What country was that? Croatia? She wasn't sure. She just wished she were on solid ground again. The thing that nauseated her most was the weasel. Last night, Kate's pet Gale had appeared in her cabin. Hazel woke from a nightmare thinking, "What is that smell?" She found a furry rodent propped on her chest, staring at her with its beady black eyes. Nothing like waking up and screaming, kicking off your covers, and dancing around your cabin while a weasel scampers between your feet, screeching and farting. Her friends rushed to her room to see if she was okay. The weasel was difficult to explain. Hazel could tell that Leo was trying hard not to make a joke. In the morning, once the excitement died down, Hazel decided to visit Coach Hedge since he could talk to animals. She found his cabin door ajar and heard the coach inside talking as if he were on the phone with someone, except they had no phones on board. Maybe he was sending a magical iris message. Hazel heard that the Greeks used those a lot. "Sure, hon," Hedge would say. "Yeah, I know, baby. No, it's great news," but his voice broke with emotion. Hazel suddenly felt Hazel suddenly felt horrible for eavesdropping. She would have backed away, but Gale squeaked at her heels. Hazel knocked on the coach's door. Hedge poked his head out, scowling as usual, but his eyes were red. "What?" he growled. "I'm sorry," Hazel said. "Are you okay?" The coach snorted and opened his door wide. "Kind of question is that?" There was no one else in the room. Hazel tried to remember why she was there. "I wondered if you could talk to my weasel." The coach's eyes narrowed. He lowered his voice. "Are we speaking in code? Is this an intruder board?" "Well, sort of." Gil peeked out from behind Hazel's feet and started chattering. The coach looked offended, but he chattered back at the weasel. They had what sounded like a very intense argument. "What did he say?" Hazel said. "A lot of rude things," grumbled the satyr. "The gist of it. She's here to see how it goes." "How what goes?" Coach Hedge stomped his hoof. "How am I supposed to know? She's a polecat. They never give a straight answer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got stuff." He closed the door in her face. After breakfast, Hazel was still at the port rail trying to settle her stomach. Next to her, Gale ran up and down the railing, passing gas, but the strong wind of the Adriatic helped whisk it away. Hazel wondered what was wrong with Coach Hedge. He must have been using iris messages to talk with someone, but if he'd got great news, why had he looked so devastated? She'd never seen him so shaken up before. Unfortunately, she doubted the coach would ask for help if he needed it. He wasn't exactly the warm and open type. She stared at the white cliffs in the distance and thought about why Hecate had sent Gale the polecat. She's here to see how it goes. Something was about to happen. Hazel would be tested. She didn't understand how she was supposed to learn magic with no training. Hecate expected her to defeat some superpower sorceress, the lady in the gold dress whom Leo had described from his dream, but how? Hazel spent all her time free trying to figure that out. She stared at her spatter, trying to make it look like a walking stick. She tried to summon a cloud to hide the full moon. She'd concentrated until her eyes crossed and her ears popped, but nothing could happen. She couldn't manipulate the mist. The last few nights, her dreams had got worse. She found herself back in the fields of Aspodal, drifting aimlessly amongst the ghosts. And then she was in Gay's cave in Alaska, where Hazel and her mother had died as the ceiling collapsed, and the voice of the earth goddess wailed in anger. She was on the stairs of her mother's apartment building in New Orleans, face to face with her father Pluto. His cold fingers gripped her arm. The fabric of his black wool suit ripped wrist with an imprisoned souls. He fixed her with dark, angry eyes and said, "The dread see what they believe. They will see, so do the living. That is a secret." He'd never said that to tell her in real life. She had no idea what it meant. The worst nightmare seemed like a glimpse of the future. Hazel was stumbling through a dark tunnel while a woman's laughter echoed around her. "Control this if you can, child of Pluto," the woman taunted. As always, Hazel dreamed about these images she'd seen in Hecate's crossroads. Leo falling through the sky, Percy and Annabeth lying unconscious, possibly dead, in front of a black metal doors, and a shrouded figure looming above them. The giant Slytius, wrapped in darkness. Next to her on the rail, Gale the weasel chittered impatiently. Hazel was tempted to push the stupid rodent into the sea. "I can't even control my own dreams," she wanted to scream. "How am I supposed to control the mist?" She was so miserable that she didn't even notice Frank until he was standing at her side. "Feeling any better?" he asked. He took her hand, his fingers completely covering hers. She could believe how much taller he'd become. He had changed into so many animals, she wasn't sure why one more transformation should amaze her, but suddenly he'd grown into his weight. No one would call him pudgy or cuddly anymore. He looked like a football player, solid and strong, with a new centre of gravity. His shoulders had been broadened. He walked with some more confidence. What Frank had done on the bridge in Venice, Hazel was still awe. None of them had actually seen the battle. Even Leo had stopped making jokes at his expense. I'm all right," Hazel managed. "You?" He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I'm taller. Otherwise, yeah, I'm good. I haven't really, changed inside." His voice held out a little cold old doubt and awkwardness. The voice of Frank, who always worried about being klutz and messing up. Hazel felt relieved. She liked that part of him. First, his new appearance had shocked her. She'd been worried that her personalities had changed. Now, she was starting to relax about that. Despite all her strength, Frank was the same sweet guy. He was still vulnerable. He still trusted her with the biggest weakness, the piece of magical firewood she carried in her coat pocket next to her heart. "I know, and I'm glad," she squeezed his hand. It's actually not you I'm worried about." Frank grunted. "How's Nico doing?" She'd been thinking about herself, not Nico, but she followed Frank's gaze to the top of the foremast when Nico was perched on the yardarm. Nico claimed that he liked to keep watch because he had good eyes. Hazel knew that wasn't the reason. The top of the mast was one of the few places on board where Nico could be alone. The others had offered him the use of Percy's cabin since Percy was, well, absent. Nico adamantly refused. He spent most of his time up in the rigging where he didn't have to talk with the rest of the crew. Since he'd been turned into a corn plant in Venice, he'd only gotten more reclusive and morose. I don't know, Hazel admitted. He'd been through a lot, getting captured in guitars, being held prisoner in that bronze jar, watching Percy and Annabeth fall, and promising to lead us to Epiros. Frank nodded. I get the feeling Nico doesn't play well with others. Frank stood up straight. He was wearing a beige t-shirt with a picture of a horse and the words Palio di Siena. He only bought it a couple of days ago, but now it was too small. When he stretched, his midriff was exposed. Hazel realized she was staring. She quickly looked away, her face flushed. Nico is my own relative, she said. He's not easy to like, but thanks for being kind to him. Frank smiled. Hey, you put up with your grandmother in Vancouver. Talk about not easy to like. I loved your grandmother. Gail the polecat scampered up to them, farted and ran away. Frank waved away the smell. Why is that thing here anyway? Hazel was almost glad he wasn't on dry land and agitated as she felt gold and gems would probably be popping up all around her feet. Hecate, said Gail to observe, she said. Observe what? Hazel tried to take comfort in Frank's presence. His new aura of solidity and strength. I don't know, she said at last. Some kind of test. Suddenly, the boat lurched forward. Chapter 26. Hazel and Frank tumbled over each other. Hazel accidentally gave herself the Heimlich maneuver with the pommel of her sword and curled on the deck, moaning and coughing up the state of the catoblep's poison. Though a fog of pain, she heard the ship's figurehead, Festus the bronze dragon, creaking in alarm and shooting fire. Dimly, Hazel wondered if they'd hit an iceberg, but in the Adriatic, in the middle of summer. The ship rocked onto port with a massive commotion, like telephone poles snapping in half. Gah! Leo yelled someone behind her. It's eating the oars. What is it? Hazel wondered. She tried to stand, but something large and heavy was pinning in her legs. She realized it was Frank grumbling as he tried to extract himself from a pile of loose ropes. Everyone else was scrambled. Jason jumped over them, his sword drawn, and raced towards the stern. Piper was already on the quarterdeck, shooting food from a cornucopia and yelling, Hey! Hey! Ain't this, you stupid turtle! Turtle? Frank helped Hazel to her feet. You okay? Yeah, Hazel liked punching her stomach. Oh! Frank sprinted up the steps, slinging off his backpack, which instantly transformed into a bow and quiver. By the time he'd reached the helm, he had already fired one arrow and was knocking the second. Leo frantically worked the ship's controls. Oars won't retract. Get it away! Get it away! Up up in the ring and Nico's face was slack with shock. Stikes! It's huge! He yelled. Port! Go Port! Coach Shed was the last one on deck. He compensated for that with enthusiasm. He bounded up the steps, waving his baseball bat, and without hesitation, Goat galloped to the stern and leaped over the rail with Glueford. Ha! Hazel staggered towards the quarterdeck to join her friends. The boat shuddered, more oars snapped, and Leo yelled, No! 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 Damn slimy shell, son of a mother. Hazel reached the stern and couldn't believe what she saw. When she heard the word turtle, she thought of a cute little thing the size of a jewelry box sitting on the rock in the middle of a fish pond. When she heard huge, her mind tried to adjust. Okay, perhaps it was like Galapagos tortoise she'd seen in the zoo or something with a shell big enough to ride on. She did not envision a creature the size of an island. When she saw a massive dome of craggy black and brown squares, the word turtle simply did not compute. Its shell was more like a landmass, hills of bone, shiny pearl valleys, kelp and moss forests, rivers of seawater trickling down the grooves of its carapace. On the ship's starboard side, another part of the monster rose from the water like a submarine. Lavas of Rome! Was that its head? Its gold eyes were the size of wading pools, with dark sideward slits for pupils. Its skin glistened like wet army camouflage, brown fleckled, green and yellow, its red toothless mouth could have swallowed the earth and hypotenuse in one single bite. Hazel watched as it snapped off half a dozen oars. Stop that! Leo wailed. Coach had clambered around the turtle's shell, whacking at it uselessly with his baseball bat and yelling, Take that! And that! Jason flew from the stern and landed on the creature's head. He stabbed his golden sword straight between its eyes, but the blade slipped sideways, as if the turtle's skin were greased steel. Frank shot arrows at the monster's eyes with no success. The turtle's filmy inner eyelids blinked with uncanny precision, deflecting each shot. Piper shot cantaloupes into the water, yelling, "Fetch, you stupid turtle!" But the turtle seemed fixed on eating the Argo too. "How did it get so close?" Hazel demanded. Leo threw his hands up in exasperation. "Must be that shell. Guess it's invisible to sonar. It's a freaking stealth turtle." "Can the ship fly?" Percy asked. With half our oars broken off, Leo punched some buttons and spun his argument sphere. "I'll have to try something else." "There!" Nico yelled from above. "Can you get us to those straits?" Hazel looked where he was pointing. About half a mile to the east, a long stripe of land ran parallel to the coastal cliffs. It was hard to see. It was hard to be sure from a distance but the stretch of water between them looked to be only 20 or 30 yards across, possibly wide enough for the Argo to slip through, but definitely not wide enough for a giant turtle shell. Yeah, Leo apparently understood. He turned the academic sphere. "Jason, get away from that thing's head. I have an idea." Jason was still hacking away at the turtle's face, but when he heard Leo said, "I have an idea," he made the only smart choice. He flew away as fast as possible. "Coach, come on," Jason said. "Nah, I got this," Hedge said. But Jason grabbed his arm around his waist and took off. Unfortunately, the coach struggled so much that Jason's sword fell out of his hand and splashed into the sea. "Coach!" Jason complained. "What?" Hedge said. "I was softening him up." The turtle head butted the hull, almost tossing the whole crew off the port side. Hazel heard a cracking sound, like the keel had just splintered. "Just another minute," Leo said, his hands flying over the console. "We might not be here another minute." Frank fired his last arrow. Piper yelled at the turtle, "Go away!" For a moment, it actually worked. The turtle turned from the ship and dipped its head underwater, but then it came right back and rammed them even harder. Jason and Coach Head landed on the deck. "You all right?" Piper asked. "Fine," Jason muttered, without a weapon, but fine. "Fire the shell!" Leo cried, spinning his Wii controller. Hazel saw that his stern had exploded. Jets of fire blasted out behind them, washing over the turtle's head. The ship shot forward and threw Hazel to the deck again. She hauled herself up and saw the ship was bouncing over the waves at an incredible speed, trading fire like a rocket. The turtle was already 100 yards behind them. Its head charred and smoked. The monster bellowed in frustration and started after them. Its paddle feet scooping through the water with such power that it actually started to gain on them. The entrance to the straits was still a quarter mile ahead. A distraction, Leo muttered. "We'll never make it unless we get a distraction." "A distraction," Hazel repeated. She concentrated and thought. "Arion!" She had no idea whether it would work, but instantly Hazel spotted something on the horizon. A flash of light and steam. It streaked across the surface of Adriatic. In a heartbeat, Arion stood on the quarterdeck. "Gods of Olympus," Hazel thought. "I love this horse." Arion snorted as if to say, "Of course you do. You're not stupid." Hazel climbed on his back. "Piper, I could use that charm stick of yours." "Once upon a time, I liked turtles," Piper muttered, accepting a hand. "Once upon a time, I liked turtles," Piper muttered, accepting a hand. "Not anymore!" Hazel spurred Arion. He leaped over the side of the boat, hitting the water at a full gallop. The turtle was a fast swimmer, but it couldn't match Arion's speed. Hazel and Piper zipped around the monster's head. Hazel slicing with a sword, Piper shouting random commands like, "Dive to the left, look behind you!" The sword did no damage. Each command only worked for a moment, but they were making the turtle very annoyed. Arion whined derisively as the turtle snapped at him, only to get a mouthful of horse vapour. Soon the monster had completely forgotten about the Argo too. Hazel kept stabbing its head. Piper kept yelling demands and using her cornucopia to bounce coconuts and roasted chickens off the turtle's eyeballs. As soon as the Argo 2 had passed into the strait, Arion broke off in harassment. They sped off the ship, and a moment later they were back on deck. The rocket fire had extinguished, though smoke and bronze exhaust vents still jutting from the stern. The Argo 2 limped forward under sail power, but their plan had paid off. They were safely harboured in the narrow waters with a long rocky island to starboard, and the sheer white cliffs to the mainland, to port. The turtle stopped at the entrance to the straits and glared at them balefully, but it made no attempt to follow. Its shell was obviously much too wide. Hazel dismounted and got a big hug from Frank. "Nice work out there," he said. Her face flushed. "Thanks." Piper slid down next to her. "Leo, since when do we have jet pollution?" Leo tried to look modest and failed. "Just a little something I whipped up in my spare time. Wish I could have given you more than a few seconds of burn. But at least I got out of there and roasted the turtle's head," Jason said appreciatively. "So what now?" "Kill it," Coach said. "You even have to ask. We've got enough distance. We've got biotics, lock and load demigods." Jason frowned. "Coach, first of all, you made me lose my sword." "Hey, I didn't ask for Nevac. Second, I think the ballast stay will do any good. That shell is like Nemean lion skin. Its head isn't any softer." So he chucked one right down his throat, Coach said, "like you guys did with that shrimp monster thing in Atlantic. Light it up from the inside." Frank scratched his head. Might work. But then you got a 5 million kilo turtle carcass blocking the entrance to the straits. We can't fly with the oars broken. How do we get the ship out?" "You wait and fix the oars," Coach said. "Or just sail in the other direction, you big galoot." Frank looked confused. "What's a galoot?" "Guys," Dyker called from the mast, "about sailing in the other direction. I don't think it's going to work." He pointed past the prow. A quarter mile ahead of them, the long rocky strip of the land curved in and met the cliffs. The channel ended in a narrow V. If the V is in Roman numeral, it would say ended in a narrow 5, but I think it'll say V as in V. V shape, I think it's called. The channel ended in a narrow V shape. V as in V shape, not V as in 5 in numerals. V as in V shape. "We're not in a straight," Jason said. "We're in a dead end." Hazel got a cold feeling. Hazel got a cold feeling in her fingers and her toes. On the port rail, Gale the weasel sat up on her haunches, staring at Hazel expectantly. "This is a trap," Hazel said. The others looked at her. "Nah, it's fine," Leo said. The others looked at her. "Worst that happens, we make repairs. Might take overnight, but I can get the ship flying again." At the mouth of the inlet, the turtle roared. It didn't appear interested in leaving. "Well," Piper shrugged, "at least the turtle can't get us. We're safe here. That's something no good demigod should ever say." The words that had barely left Piper's mouth when an arrow sank into the mainmast 6 inches from her face. The crew scattered for cover except for Piper, who stood frozen place, gaping at the arrow that had almost pierced her nose the hard way. "Piper, dark!" Jason whispered harshly, but no other missile rained down. Frank studied the angle of the bolt in the mast and pointed towards the top of the cliffs. Up there, he said. Single shooter, see him? The sun was in her eyes, but Hazel spotted a tiny figure standing at the top of the ledge. The bronze armor glittered. Who the heck is he? He demanded. Why is he firing at us? Guys, Piper's voice was thin and watery. There's a note. Hazel hadn't seen it before, but a parchment scroll was tied to the arrow shaft. She wasn't sure, but that made her angry. She soared over and untied it. Hazel, Leah said, you sure that's safe? She read the note aloud. First line. Stand and deliver. What does that mean? The coach had complained. We are standing, we'll crouch anyway. If that guy is expecting a pizza delivery, forget it. There's more, Hazel said. This is a robbery. Send two of them too. Leave the magic horse, no flying, no tricks, just climb. Climb what? Piper asked. I pointed. There. A narrow set of steps was carved into the cliff, leading to the top. The turtle, the dead-end channel, the cliff. Hazel got the feeling that this was not the first time the letter writer had ambushed a ship here. She cleared her throat and kept reading aloud. I do mean all your valuables, otherwise my turtle and I will destroy you. You have 5 minutes. Use the catapults, cried the coach. P.S. Hazel read. Don't even think about using your catapults. Curse it, said the coach. This guy is good. Is the note signed? Nico asked. Hazel shook her head. She'd heard a story back at Camp Jupiter. Something about a robber who worked with a giant turtle, but as usual, as soon as she needed the information, it sat annoyingly in the back of her memory, just out of reach. The weasel Gale watched her, wait and see what she would do. The test hadn't happened yet. Hazel thought, distracing the turtle hadn't been enough. Hazel hadn't proven anything about how she could manipulate the mist. Mostly because she couldn't manipulate the mist. Leo studied the cliff top and muttered under his breath. That's not a good trajectory. Even if I could arm that catapult before that guy pincushioned us with arrows, I don't think I could make the shot. That's hundreds of feet, almost straight up. Yeah, Frank grumbled. My bow is useless too. He's got a huge advantage being above us like that. I couldn't reach him. And Piper nudged the arrow that was stuck in the mast. I have a feeling he's a good shot. I don't think he meant to hit me, but if he did, as he didn't need to elaborate. Whoever it was, he could hit a target from hundreds of feet away. He could shoot them all before they could react. I'll go, Hazel said. She hated the idea, but she was sure Kate had set things up. As some sort of the twisted challenge, this was Hazel's test. Her turn to save the ship, as if she needed confirmation. Gale scampered along the railing and jumped over her shoulder, ready to hitch a ride. The others stared at her. Frank gripped his bow. Hazel! No, listen! She said. No, listen, she said. This woman wants valuables. I can go and up there, summon gold and jewels, whatever he wants. Leo raised an eyebrow. If we pay him off, you'll think he'll actually let us go? We don't have much choice, Nago said. Between that guy and the turtle, Jason raised his hand. The others fell silent. I'll go too, he said. The letter says 2 people. I'll take Hazel up there and watch her back. Besides, I don't like the look of those steps. If Hazel falls, well, I can use the winds to keep us both from coming down the hard way. Everyone whined in protest as if to say, "Go without me, you're kidding, right?" I have to. Arian, Hazel said. Jason, yes, I think you're right. It's the best plan. Only wish I had my sword. Jason glared at the coach. It's back there at the bottom of the sea, and I don't have Percy to retrieve it. Then Percy passed over them like a cloud. The mood on deck got even darker. Hazel stretched out her arms. She didn't think about it. She just concentrated on the water and called for imperial gold. A stupid idea. The sword was much too far away, probably hundreds of feet underwater, but she felt a quick tug in her fingers like a bite of a fishing line, and Jason's blade flew out of the water and into her hand. Here, she said, handing it over. Jason's eyes widened. How? That was like half a mile. I've been practicing, she said. Though it wasn't true, she hoped she hadn't accidentally cursed Jason's sword by summoning it the way she cursed jewels and precious metals. After all, she'd raised a bunch of imperial gold equipment from Glacier Bay and distributed it to the 5th cohort. That had worked out okay. She decided not to worry about it. She felt so angry at her Kate and so tired of being manipulated by the gods that she wasn't going to let any trifling problems stand in her way. Now, if there are no other objections, we have a robber to meet. Robber, not Robert. Robber to meet. Chapter 27. Hazel. Hazel liked the great outdoors, but climbing a 200-foot tall cliff on a stairway without rails, with a bad-tempered weasel on her shoulder, not so much. Especially when she could have ridden on Arian to the top in a matter of seconds. Jason walked behind her so he could catch her if she fell. Hazel appreciated that, but it didn't make the sheer drop any less scary. She glanced to her right, which was a mistake. Her foot almost slipped, sending a spray of gravel over the edge. Gail squeaked in alarm. "You all right?" Jason asked. "Yes." Hazel's heart's jack hammered at her ribs. "Fine." She had no room to turn and look at him. He just had to trust. She just had to trust. He wouldn't let her plummet to her death, since he could fly. He was the only logical backup. Still, she wished it were Frank at her back, or Nico, or Piper, or Leo. Or even, well, okay, maybe not Coach Head, but still Hazel could get a read on Jason Grace. Ever since he'd arrived at Camp Jupiter, she'd heard stories about him. The campus spoke with reverence about the son of Jupiter who'd risen lowly ranks of the 5th cohort to become a praetor. Praetor. led them to victory in the Battle of Mount Town, then disappeared. Even now, after all the events of the past couple of weeks, Jason seemed more like a legend than a person. I had a hard time warming to him, with those icy blue eyes and that careful reserve, like he was calculating every word before he said it. Also, she couldn't forget how he'd been ready to write off her brother, Nico, when they'd learned he was a captive in Rome. Jason had thought Nico was bait for a trap. He had been right, and maybe now that Nico was safe, Hazel could see why Jason's caution was a good idea. Though she didn't quite know what to think of the guy. What if they got themselves into trouble at the top of this cliff, and Jason decided that saving Hazel wasn't in the best interest of the quest? She glanced up. She couldn't see a thief from here, but she sensed he was waiting. Hazel was confident she could produce enough gems and gold to impress even the greediest robber. She wondered if the treasure she summoned would still bring bad luck. She'd never been sure whether that curse had been broken when she had died the first time. This seemed like a good opportunity to find out. Anyone who robbed innocent demigods with a giant turtle deserved a few nasty curses. Elder Weasel jumped off her shoulder and scampered ahead. She glanced back and barked eagerly. "Going as fast as I can," Hazel muttered. She couldn't shake the feeling that the weasel was anxious to watch her fail. Controlling the mist, Jason said, "Have you had any luck?" "No," Hazel admitted. She didn't like to think about her failures. The seagull she couldn't turn into a dragon. Coach Hedges' baseball bat suddenly refusing to turn into a hot dog. She just couldn't make herself believe any of it was possible. "You'll get it," Jason said. His tone surprised her. It wasn't a throwaway comment, just to be nice. He sounded truly confident. She kept climbing, but she imagined him watching her with those piercing blue eyes, his jaw set with confidence. "How can you be sure?" she asked. "Just am. I've got a good instinct for what people can do. There we go. Anyway, Hecate wouldn't have picked you if she didn't believe you had power." Maybe that should have made Hazel feel better. It didn't. She had a good instinct for people too. She understand what motive made most of her friends, even her brother Nico, who wasn't easy to read. But Jason, she didn't have a clue. Everybody said he was a natural leader. She believed it. Here he was, making her feel like a valuable member of the team. The team. Well, Jason is good. Or the team was telling her she was capable of anything. But what was Jason capable of? She couldn't talk to anyone about her doubts. Frank was in awe of the guy. Viper, of course, was head over heels. Leo was his best friend. Even Nico seemed to follow his lead without question. But Hazel couldn't forget that Jason had been Hera's best move in the war against giants. The Queen of Olympus had dropped Jason into Camp Carplo, which had started to keep this entire chain of events to stop the gale. Why Jason first? Something told Hazel he was the linchpin. Jason wouldn't be the final play too. The storm of either word must fall. That's what the prophecy said. As much as Hazel feared fire, she feared storms more. Grace could cause some pretty huge storms. She glanced up and saw the rim of the cliff only a few yards above her. She reached the top breathless and sweaty. A long sloping valley marched inland, dotted with scraggy olive trees and limestone boulders There was no signs of civilization. Hazel's leg trembled from the climb. Gale seemed anxious to explore. The weasel barked and farted and scrambled into the nearest bushes. Far below, the Argo too looked like a toy boat in the channel. Hazel didn't understand how anyone could shoot an arrow accurately from this high up, accounting for the wind and the glare of the sun of the water at the mouth of the inlet. The massive shape of the turtle's shell glinted like a burnished coin. Jason joined her at the top, looking no worse for the climb. He started to say, "Where?" "Here," said a voice. Hazel flinched. Only 10 feet away, a man had appeared, a bow, quiver over his shoulders, and 2 old-fashioned flintlock dueling pistol in his hands. He wore high leather boots, leather breeches, and a pirate-style shirt. His curly black hair looked like a kid's do, and his sparkly green eyes were friendly enough, but a red bandana covered the lower half of his face. "Welcome," the bandit cried, pointing his guns at them. "Your money or your life." Hazel was certain that he hadn't been there a second ago. He'd simply materialized as if he'd stepped out from behind an invisible curtain. "Who are you?" Hazel asked. The bandit laughed. "Ha ha ha. Syrian, of course." "Cheerin?" Jason asked, like the center. The bandit rolled his eyes. "Skyron, my friend, son of Poseidon, thief extraordinaire, Dinea, all-around awesome guy, but that's not important. I'm not seeing any valuables," he cried, as if it was excellent news. "I guess that means you want to die." "Wait," Hazel said. "We've got valuables, but if we give them up, how can we be sure you'll let us go?" "Oh, they always ask us," Siren said. "I promise you on the river sides that as soon as you surrender what I want, I will not shoot you. I'll send you right back down the cliff." Hazel gave Jason a wary look. The river strikes or no, the way Siren phrased promise didn't reassure her. "What if you fought us, Jason? What if we fought you?" Jason asked. "You couldn't attack us and hold our ship hostage at the same. Bang, bang! It happened so fast that Hazel's brain needed a moment to catch up. Smoke curled from the side of Jason's head. Just above his left ear, a groove cut through his hair like a racing stripe. One of Siren's flintlocks was still pointed at his face. The other flintlock was pointed down over the side of the cliff, as Siren's second shot had been fired on the Argo too. Hazel choked from delayed shock. "What did you do?" "Oh, don't worry," Siren laughed. "If you can see that far, which you can't, you see a hole in the deck between the shoes of the big young man, the one with the bow, Frank." Siren shuddered. "If you say no, that was just a demonstration. I'm afraid it could have been much more serious." He spun his flintlocks. The hammers reset, and Hazel had a feeling that the gun had magically reloaded. Siren waggled his eyebrows at Jason. "So, to answer your question, yes, I can attack you and hold your ship hostage at the same time. Celestial bronze ammunition, quite deadly to the demigods. You two would die first. Bang, bang. Then I could take my time picking off your friends on our ship. Target practicing is so much fun with live targets running around screaming." Jason touched the new furrow that the bullet had ploughed through his hair. For once he didn't look very confident. His ankles wobbled. Frank was the best shot she knew. But this bandit Syrian was inhumanly good. "You're a son of Poseidon," she managed. "I would have thought Apollo. The way you shoot." The smile lines deepened around his eyes. "Why, thank you. It's just from the practice, though. Giant turtle, that's due to my parentage. You can't go around taming giant turtles while being a son of Poseidon. I could overwhelm your ship with a tidal wave, of course, but it's terribly difficult work. Not nearly as fun as ambushing and shooting people." Hazel tried to collect her thoughts for a time. "With flintlocks, what's the bandana for?" "So no one recognizes me," Siren said. But you introduced yourself, Jason said. You're Siren. Bandit's eyes widened. How did you? Oh, yes, I suppose I did. He lowered one of the flintlock and scratched the side of his head with the other. Terribly sloppy of me. Sorry. I'm afraid I'm a little rusty back from the dead and all of that. Let me try again. He levelled his pistol. Stand and deliver. I am an anonymous bandit, and you do not need to know my name. An anonymous bandit? Something clicked in Hazel's memory. Theseus, he killed you once. Siren slumped. Now, why did you have to mention him? We were getting along so well. Jason frowned. Hazel, you know this guy's story? She nodded, though the details were murky. Theseus met him on the road to Athens. Siren would kill his victims by, something about the turtle. Hazel couldn't remember. Theseus was such a cheater, Siren complained. I don't want to talk about him. I'm back from the dead now. Gale promised me I could stay on the coastline and rob all the demigods I wanted. And that's what I'm going to do. Now, where were we? You about to let us go, Hazel ventured. Siren said. No, I'm pretty sure that wasn't it. Oh, right. Money or your life. Where are your valuables? No valuables, then I have to... Wait, he said. I have a valuable. At least I can get them. Siren pointed a flintlock at Jason's head. Well, then, my dear, hop it to it. Or my next shot will cut off more than your friend's hair. Hazel hardly needed to concentrate. She was so anxious. The ground rumbled beneath her and immediately yielded. Her bumper crop precious metals popping to the surface, as though the earth was anxious to expel them. She found herself surrounded by a tiny mound of treasure, Roman denarii, silver drachmas, ancient gold, jewellery, glittering diamonds and topaz and rubies, enough to fill several lawn bags. Siren laughed in delight. How in the world did you do that? Hazel didn't answer. She thought about all those coins that had appeared in the crossroad with Hecate. Here were even more centuries worth of hidden wealth from every empire that had ever claimed this land. Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and so many others. Those empires were gone, leaving only a barren coastline for Siren the bandit. That, though, made her feel small and powerless. Just take the treasure, she said. Let us go. Siren chuckled. Oh, right, I did say all your valuables. I understand you're holding something very special on the ship. I set an ivory and gold statue about, say, 40 feet tall. The sweat started drying on Hazel's neck, sending a shiver down her back. Jason stepped forward, despite the gun pointed at his face. His eyes were as hard as sapphires. The statue isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not, Siren agreed. I must have it. Gay told you about it, Hazel guessed. She ordered you to take it? Siren shrugged. Maybe, but she told me I could keep it for myself. Hard to pass off that offer. I don't intend to die again, my friends. I intend to live a long life as well as a very wealthy man. The statue won't do any good, Hazel said. Not if Gaia destroys the world. The muzzles of Siren pistol waved. Pardon? Gaia's using you, Hazel said. If you take the statue, we won't be able to defeat her. She's planning on wiping all mortals and demigods off the face of the earth and letting her giants and monsters take over. So where will you spend your gold, Siren? Assuming Gaia even lets you live. Hazel, let her sink in. She figured Siren would have no trouble believing in double crosses. Being a bandit and all, he was silent for a count of 10. Finally, his smile line returned. All right, he said. I'm not unreasonable. Keep the statue. Jason blinked. We can go. Just one more thing, Siren said. I always demand a show of respect. Before I let my victims leave, I insist that they wash my feet. Hazel wasn't sure she'd heard him right. Then Siren kicked off his leather boots one after the other. His bare feet were the most disgusting things Hazel has ever seen. And she had some very disgusting things. They were puffy. They were puffy, wrinkled, and white as dough, as if they'd been soaking in formaldehyde for a few centuries. Tufts of brown hair sprouted from each misshapen toe. Tufts of brown hair sprouted from each misshapen toe. His jagged toenails were green and yellow like a tortoise's shell. Then the smell hit her. Hazel didn't know if her father's underwood palace had a cafeteria for bumblebees, but if it did, that cafeteria would smell like Siren's feet. So, Siren wiggled his disgusting toes. Who wants the left and who wants the right? Jason turned almost as white as those feet. You've got to be kidding. Not at all, Siren said. Wash my feet and we're done. I'll send you back down the cliff, I promise, on the river Styx. He made that promise so easily, alarm bells rang in Hazel's mind. Feet, send you back down the cliff, tortoiseshell. Story came back to her. All the pieces. The story came back to her, all the missing pieces fitting into place. She remembered how Siren killed his victims. Could we have a moment? Hazel asked the bandit. Siren's eyes narrowed. What for? Well, it's a big decision, she said. Left foot, right foot. We need to discuss. You could tell she was smiling under the mask. Of course, he said. I'm so generous, you can have 2 minutes. Hazel climbed over a pile of treasure. She led Jason as far away as she dared, about 50 feet down the cliff, where she hoped was out of earshot. Siren kicks his victims off the cliff, she whispered. Jason scowled. What? When you kneel down to wash his feet, Hazel said. That's how he kills you. When you're off balance, woozy from the smell of his feet, he'll kick you over the edge. You'll fall right into the mouth of his giant turtle. Jason took a moment to digest that, so to speak. He glanced over the cliff where the turtle's massive shell glinted just under the water. So we had to fight, Jason said. Siren's too fast, Hazel said. He'll kill us both. Then I'll be ready to fly when he kicks me over. I'll float halfway down the cliff, then when he kicks you, I'll catch you. Hazel shook her head. If he kicks you hard and fast enough, you'll be too dazed to fly, and even if you can, Siren's got the eyes of marksman. He'll watch you fall. If you hover, he'll just shoot you out of the air. Then Jason clenched his sword hilt. I hope you have another idea. A few feet away, Gale the weasel appeared from the bushes. She gnashed her teeth and peered over Hazel as if to say, well, do you? Hazel calmed her nerves, trying to avoid pulling more gold from the ground. She remembered the dream she'd had of her father, Pluto's voice. The dead see what they believe, and will see, so do the living. That is the secret. She understood what she had to do. She hated the idea more than hating the farted weasel. More she hated was Siren's feet. Unfortunately, yes, Hazel said. We have to let Siren win. What? Jason demanded. Hazel told him the plan.